morning and welcome back to the Mission Control Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room, where the Space Station Flight Control team has been following along with the preparations for the Soyuz MS-07's deorbit burn coming up at 6:47, just 32 minutes from now, and it's landing at 7:40 a.m. Central Time in Kazakhstan. On board the Soyuz Expedition 55 crew members Scott Tingle of NASA, Norishika Kanai of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and Anton Shkaplerov of Roscosmos have already closed the hatches between their vehicle and the International Space Station at 1:02 a.m. Central Time, and then undocked from the space station at 6:14 a.m. That officially wrapped up Expedition 55 after 166 days on board the space station. Remaining behind, the newly minted Expedition 56 crew members, Commander Drew Feustel and flight engineers Ricky Arnold and Oleg Artemyev, are wrapping up their day and enjoying their first night as a three-person crew. Here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, Flight Director Scott Stover is leading the team through the morning's activities, with Capcom Andreas Mogensen, who is an ESA astronaut, helping at his side. And then on the other side of the world, the flight control team in Moscow is led tonight by Svetlana Mironova. And going a little farther, in Kazakhstan, a number of officials and vehicles are standing by in preparation for this morning's landing. 8 Mi-8 helicopters are on their way from Karaganda, Kazakhstan, to the primary landing site, which is just southeast of Zhezkazgan. Those helicopters hold the television equipment that will provide us views of the landing, and also the inflatable medical tent that the crew members will be taken to immediately after touching down. 2 more helicopters will be ready about 250 miles away, in the area where touchdown would take place if a ballistic entry occurred, with the capsule coming in at a steeper entry than usual. And then a final 2 helicopters will loiter midway between those 2 sites. Also aboard the helicopters, headed to the primary landing site, are several NASA representatives, including Deputy Space Station Program Manager Dan Hartman, astronaut Kjell Lindgren, Flight Surgeon Rainer Effenhauser, and NASA Landing Team Coordinator Chad Rowe, as well as NASA spokesperson Gary Jordan and NASA photographer Bill Ingalls. 6 all-terrain vehicles have also been deployed for landing, and 3 airplanes that serve as flying command centers. Those airplanes will provide direct communication with the crew and relay those communications back to Moscow. Weather for this morning's touchdown is forecast to be clear and cool, with temperatures in the 60s and winds at 23 miles per hour. So we're hoping to get you some great views of the crew's return to Earth, now 1 hour and 21 minutes away. As you follow along with this morning's activities, we'd love to hear from you. If you have questions, please send them in via social media using the hashtag AskNASA. We'll try to answer a few of those over the course of the morning, so be sure and get those in. Despite the early morning hour, it's already been a busy day in space and here on the ground. The International Space Station crew actually started their day around 5 p.m. Central on Saturday, a change from their usual wake-up of 1 a.m. Central. And after making the final preparations for departure, the 6 crew members said a final round of goodbyes and closed hatches between their vehicles at 1:02 a.m. Central. Some video of that activity is playing here with Oleg Artemyev, one of the crew members left behind as part of Expedition 56, closing the hatch on the space station side of the hatchway. On the other side, of course, is Scott Tingle, Norishika Kanai, and Anton Shkaplerov. That again took place at 1:02 a.m. Central Time. And then once the hatches were closed, there were a series of leak checks on both sides before the Soyuz MS-07 undocked from the Rosfit module. That was at 6:14 a.m. Here's some recorded video of that undocking, which again took place at 4:16 a.m. Central Time when the space station and Soyuz were at about 253 miles above Mongolia. Shortly after that undocking, the Soyuz performed 2 short engine burns, one lasting 8 seconds and one lasting 15 seconds, to move the Soyuz away from the International Space Station. It's aiming at a spot about 12 miles away for the Deorbit burn, which is now 26 minutes away and counting. This undocking marked the end of 166 days spent at the International Space Station for the 3 astronauts on board. And with the additional 2 days it took them to arrive at the space station following their launch on December 17th, when they touch down in Kazakhstan in 1 hour and 18 minutes, they'll have spent a total of 168 days in space and traveled 71.2 million miles on 2,688 orbits around the Earth. And it's been a busy 168 days for the crew. And they again are made up of Scott Tingle, Norishika Kanai, and Anton Shkaplerov. Over the course of it, they saw the arrival of 4 other vehicles, one SpaceX Dragon cargo vehicle, one Russian Progress resupply ship, one orbital ATK Cygnus cargo vehicle, and one Soyuz, which in March delivered the crewmates they'll be leaving behind. It's Drew Feustel, Ricky Arnold, and Oleg Artemiev. They also packed up and waved goodbye to 2 SpaceX Dragons, one Progress, and the Soyuz that took home Mark Vande Hei, Joe Acaba, and Alexander Masurkin, who were at the space station when Tingle, Kanai, and Shkaplerov arrived. All 3 of the astronauts landing today were also able to participate in spacewalks during their time at the space station. Tingle's in January lasted 7 hours and 24 minutes. Shkaplerov's on February 2nd lasted 8 hours and 13 minutes. That's a Russian duration record. And because it was his second spacewalk, he now has spent a total of 14 hours and 28 minutes outside the space station spacewalking. And Kanai's spacewalk was on February 16th. It lasted 5 hours and 57 minutes. For Tingle and Kanai, this was their first space flight, so they'll each return home with that 168 days as their total time spent in space. And it was Shkaplerov's 3rd mission, so he'll now have a total of 532 days in space, putting him at 17 on the all-time list for most days spent in space, tied with Mikhail Turin. We're about 19 minutes away now from today's deorbit burn, coming up at 6:47 a.m. Central Time, and everything's going according to plan in preparation for that burn. It will be performed when the Soyuz is about 12 miles away from the space station. It'll start 24 seconds after 6:47 and finish 4 minutes and 40 seconds later at 4 seconds after 6:52 a.m. Central. The engines will fire against the direction that the Soyuz is traveling again, basically acting as a brake on the Soyuz and slowing it down to drop it out of orbit. Then about 20 minutes after the deorbit burn is complete, when the Soyuz is at an altitude of 86 miles above the Earth, the vehicle's computers will command the 3 modules of the Soyuz to separate. An orbital module on top, which is where the crew has a small amount of room to move around during the 2-day flight to the space station, and the instrumentation and propulsion module on the bottom, which houses the oxygen storage tanks, the attitude thrusters, avionics and communications and control equipment. Both of those will separate from the descent module, which is in the middle. That's where the crew resides. It holds personally contoured seats for the crew members' use during launch and entry, as well as landing, and it also has all the controls and displays necessary for critical flight activities. In addition, it has the life support provisions and batteries for reentry and landing, and parachutes and soft landing rocket engines that slow the vehicle down just before touchdown. That's actually the only part of the Soyuz that's going to return to Earth. The orbital module and the instrumentation and propulsion module both burn up in the Earth's atmosphere, while the descent module continues on with Tingle, Kanai, and Shkaplerov inside. Three minutes after the deorbit burn at 7:17 a.m. Central, when the Soyuz is about 62 miles above the Earth, the Soyuz will begin feeling the Earth's atmosphere again. The descent module's computers will orient the capsule with its ablative heat shield pointing forward to protect it from the heat of the Earth's atmosphere as it begins to fly through it, and then the crew will begin to feel gravity for the first time in 168 days. You can see where that happens here on this chart, just above the atmosphere line. I mentioned that the heat shield is ablative, and that means that as it begins to travel through the atmosphere and feel the heat of reentry, the material of the heat shield basically burns away rather than transferring the heat back into the capsule. The worst of the heat will last from 7:18 to 7:23 a.m. Central, during which temperature around the spacecraft will be so great that the air surrounding it will turn into plasma. 7:23 is also when the crew inside the Soyuz will experience the maximum gravity load. After that, it's a wait of just 2 minutes before the Soyuz parachutes are commanded to open. About 15 minutes before landing, when they're still 35,000 feet up, or about 6.6 miles, the Soyuz computers will command the first of a series of parachutes to deploy. 2 pilot parachutes will come first, one 6.7 square feet and one 48.4 square feet. Together, they'll drag out the drogue chute, a 172 square foot parachute that slows the Soyuz down from about 492 miles per hour to about 178 miles per hour. The drogue chute also creates a gentle spin for the Soyuz as it dangles underneath, helping to stabilize the capsule in its final minutes before touchdown. And just before touchdown, that drogue chute will be jettisoned to make way for the deployment of the 5,575 square foot main parachute. That will continue to slow the capsule down to a speed of about 22 miles per hour. And at first, the capsule will hang beneath it at a 30-degree angle to the horizon to help with aerodynamic stability. But after one of the 2 harnesses connecting the parachute to the capsule is severed, the Soyuz will right itself so that the vertical position is achieved for touchdown. When the capsule is just 16,000 feet, or about 3 miles above the Earth, the capsule's heat shield will be jettisoned, and any residual propellant will dissipate. Without the heat shield, the Soyuz's altimeter, an instrument that measures altitude by bouncing signals off to the ground and back to the Soyuz, will be exposed to the surface of the Earth, and then it can be used to provide the capsule's computer with updated information on altitude and rate of descent. At this point, the vehicle's computer will also arm the module's seat shock absorbers. And when the Soyuz drops to an altitude of about 39 feet, the cockpit displays will tell the Soyuz commander, that's Anton Shkaplerov, to prepare to fire the soft landing engines. Those are 6 solid propellant engines, and they'll actually fire about 3 feet above the ground, just seconds before touchdown, slowing the Soyuz down even further for its touchdown at 7:40 a.m. Central Time. We've still got more than 12 minutes before the deorbit burn, so we're going to take a few questions that we've been getting in on social media. Again, you can send your question in using the hashtag AskNASA. We'll try to get as many as possible in before the end of the show. First up from Moog1976, asking, have the Astros been up all night and have the rest of the crew gone back to bed now that the hatches are closed? So the astronauts actually took about a 6-hour nap before all the activities really got going today. And we say they took a 6-hour nap. They had time on their schedule for a 6-hour nap. And of course, they're adults, so whether or not they actually took it was up to them. But they got a wake-up call at 5 p.m. Central Time, which is quite a bit different than their usual 1 a.m. Central Time wake-up call. Now that the 3 members of the Expedition 55 crew have departed, the 56 crew members left behind are getting ready for their sleep period to begin, and then they'll have some off-duty time tomorrow as well. And of course, the crew on board the Soyuz will have to wait until they get back to Earth and actually go through a few medical tests before they get a chance to lay down and grab some sleep. Also from Anand on Twitter, we have the question, how much heat is the spacecraft going to face? How much heat a spacecraft faces coming back through the Earth's atmosphere depends on how far away it is. So the farther away from Earth you go, the faster you come in, and that makes more heat because you go through the Earth's atmosphere faster. From the International Space Station, a spacecraft can expect to feel about 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And so you want to be sure you have a good heat shield. If you're coming back from the moon or Mars, that of course increases, so you need to have an even hardier heat shield. And just for comparison, if you've been watching the news and seeing about the volcano eruption in Hawaii, the lava from a volcano is about 22,000 degrees Fahrenheit. From Scarlett on Twitter, she wants to know how the capsule handles the heat when entering the Earth's atmosphere. And the way that the Soyuz handles the heat is with an ablative heat shield. An ablative heat shield actually burns away as it goes through the heat so that the heat is dissipated rather than transferring it back into the capsule. And really, the astronauts inside the capsule shouldn't feel too much heat at all.
Понял. Очередная метка ТСКД -8, 14.
And Aruda on Twitter, Twitter asked, or actually I believe this one was from Facebook, what speed does the satellite move, and can the speed be increased or decreased? When it's attached to the International Space Station, the Soyuz is going, and the space station, of course, are going about 17,500 miles per hour. And that stays pretty steady for the most part. However, once the Soyuz undocks from the space station, it moves away from the space station specifically so that it can start slowing down and dropping back into the Earth's atmosphere. So it will go from 17,000 miles per hour to 0 miles per hour in the course of about 3.5 hours as it performs its deorbit burn and returns to Earth. And Alexander Nowak on Twitter asking how many people can travel in the capsule. The Soyuz is specifically built for 3 people, and it is a fairly tight fit. There's not a lot of room to try and smuggle anybody else up to space in it. You can see here kind of how the capsule is set up. You've got 3 seats. The commander, in this case Anton Shkaplerov, will be sitting in the middle, with Scott Tingle on his left and Norishika Kanai on his right. And this is just the middle part of the Soyuz. There's also another part that gives them a little bit more room to move around on the way to the space station. But this is the only thing that comes back from the space station with them.
Москва, Ястреб 1, 14:25, есть разворот. Наблюдаем время до включения СКД.
Electra on Twitter asked, does the body feel major changes when we're out of Earth's gravity and coming back into it? And yes, once the astronauts get to the space station and have to learn to live in 0 gravity, they do experience a lot of changes that we pay a lot of attention to because we want to know exactly how the body reacts to living in 0 gravity, so that as we explore further out into the into the solar system, we have a good idea of what to expect. And then when they come back to gravity, they also have to get used to that. Once their body is adjusted, they then have to readjust. And a lot of people have a little bit of basically gravity sickness when they come back, a lot like motion sickness you might have from various activities on Earth, and they have to have an adjustment period. And that's also something we're interested in because, say, if you have gone on a 9-month mission to Mars, we want to know how you will be reacting to gravity on the Martian surface once you experience after landing. Just under 3 minutes left until the Soyuz MS-07 begins its deorbit burn. That starts at 6:47 and will last 4 minutes and 40 seconds to wrap up at 6:52. That again will drop the Soyuz back into the Earth's atmosphere and prepare it to, or put it on course for a landing in Kazakhstan at 7:40 a.m. Central Time.
Японская Ястра-1.
На связи.
Минута включения СКД. Есть подготовка режим стабил. ЮССГ. L3, L7.
Принято.
Есть
Принято.
на формате 42 открытие крышки СКД. Включаем
Принято.
G3.
Подаем G3.
G3 горит.
Deorbit burn scheduled to start in 30 seconds now.
Принято. Есть.
Again, it'll last a full 4 minutes and 40 seconds
Напоминаю.
and wrap up at 6:52 a.m. Central Time.
Импульс.
Вас понял, время и импульс. 15 секунд до включения СКД.
Принято.
Шкапlerov есть, работа СКД.
Принято.
Есть нарастание перегрузки.
And the team here on the ground reporting that the deorbit burn has officially started.
15 секунд, 6 метров набрали.
Принято.
Engines will be firing into the direction that the Soyuz has been traveling so that it will slow down and then drop back into the Earth's atmosphere.
30 секунд, 13.3 метров.
Принято.
— 45 секунд, набрали 20 метров. Ориентация в норме.
Принято.
Отработали минуту, набрали 27 метров. Ориентация в норме.
Принято.
Отработали минуту 15, 34 метра. Ориентация в норме.
Принято.
Минута 30, 41 метр. Ориентация в норме.
Принято.
Минута 45, набрали 48.6 метров в секунду.
Seconds,
Принято.
meters. Copy.
Отработали 2 минуты.
We have been operating for 2 minutes. We have gained 55 meters. Altitude is nominal. Copy.
2 minutes and 15 seconds into the deorbit burn. Everything's going well so far, according to the crew on board.
Meter gain.
Принято.
Copy.
Минут 30 секунд. 69 метров.
2 minutes 30 seconds. We have accelerated by 69 meters. Copy.
Отработали 2 минуты 45.
2 minutes 45 seconds, and the burn is 76 meters. Altitude is nominal.
Принято.
Copy.
Отработали 3 минуты.
We have been operating for 3 minutes, and the burn 83.3. Altitude is nominal.
Отработали 3 минуты 15 секунд.
3 minutes 15 seconds. Burn is 90 meters, and altitude is nominal. Copy.
Отработали 3:30. Импульс.
3 minutes 30 seconds. Burn 98 meters. Altitude is nominal. Copy.
1 minute left to go in the deorbit burn. Everything's still looking good.
Отработали 3 минуты 45
We
секунд.
have been operating for 3 minutes 45 seconds.
Принято.
Altitude is nominal. Copy.
Отработали 4 минуты 100.
4 minutes 111 meters. Burn. Copy.
Отработали 4 минуты 25 секунд.
4 minutes 20 seconds. 123 meters.
Отработали 4:30. СОП Москвы есть.
MCC. Moscow, we have SKD deactivation.
128.1.
128.1 meter burn.
Есть артиллерия по гибкому циклу, есть термодатчики подключены.
We have the thermal sensors activated. Copy.
All indications that the deorbit burn went off just exactly as planned. 4 minutes and 40 seconds, wrapping up at 6:52 a.m. Central Time and setting the Soyuz on course for landing at 7:40 in Kazakhstan. The next milestone will be will be coming up at 7:14 when the
Preparing for separation. Copy.
when the descent module will separate from the other two modules of the Soyuz. That's the only part that will come back to Earth, and it, of course, is the section that carries 3 astronauts inside: Scott Tingle, Norishika Kanai, and Anton Shkaplerov. 10 minutes away now from the separation of the descent module from the orbital module and the instrumentation and propulsion module. The orbital module is on top and the instrumentation and propulsion module are on bottom. Orbital module houses a little bit of room to move around during the trip to the space station after launch, and then the instrumentation and propulsion module houses the oxygen storage tanks, attitude thrusters, avionics, and communications and control equipment. Both those come apart from the descent module at 7:14 a.m. Central Time today, while the descent module with the crew inside goes on to land on Earth. Besides the crew, it contains personally contoured seats for them to sit in during launch, entry, and landing, as well as all the controls and displays necessary for critical flight activities. You can see a graphic here of how that separation works, and of course the descent module also has the heat shield that protects the crew as they are coming back through the Earth's atmosphere, as well as the parachutes that then slow it down for a relatively gentle landing. There are a series of parachutes, starting with 2 pilot chutes that pull out a drogue chute that slows the spacecraft down and then makes way for the main parachute. And of course, there are also 6 soft landing engines as well that further slow it down.
For mission control. The crew members are feeling well. Room copy.
Разделение -6.
Separation -6. We need to be in the readiness mode. You will need to close your helmet, pressurized helmet, prepare the automatic system, and have the Rus hand controller in your hands.
Flight control team on the ground in Moscow. They're going over the items that the crew needs to check off their list in preparation for the separation of the descent module. Again, that's coming up a little less than 10 minutes now at 7:14 a.m. Central Time. Got time for a couple of more Ask NASA questions, and you can keep those coming using the hashtag AskNASA. This one from Lee on Twitter asking if a ballistic entry occurs, what would be the expected effects of the passengers of the Soyuz? Ballistic entry is what happens when the capsule comes in more shallow than it's supposed to. We don't expect that to happen today, but we are always prepared just in case it does. And generally, the effects would be that that the passengers would be okay. They might be a little bit more, might have a little bit of a harsher landing than usual. But we've had several astronauts come through ballistic entries and come out the other end just fine. And this one from Ollie Oliver asking, will we hear a sonic boom everywhere? He's in Hawaii and wondering if he will hear it there. No, I'm sorry, you will not hear a sonic boom in Hawaii. Sonic booms you're generally heard when the spacecraft breaks the sound barrier and generally only right under where they do so. So since the Soyuz is landing and coming in over Kazakhstan, you would not be able to expect to hear a sonic boom in Hawaii or really anywhere else other than Kazakhstan. Once we get to the point of the Soyuz descent module separation at 7:14 a.m. Central Time, things will start happening pretty fast. Just a couple minutes after that, the Soyuz will begin to experience the Earth's atmosphere. Things will be heating up, especially on the heat shield, of course, and the crew will start to feel the first effects of gravity. After that, they will be beginning at 7:18 a.m. Central Time to enter the point where the air around the capsule gets so hot that it turns into plasma. That starts at 7:18 and lasts until about 7:23 a.m. Central Time, which is also when they'll feel the maximum amount of gravity. They'll feel about 4 or 5 times the gravity that we feel here on Earth at that point. That lasts again until about 7:23 a.m. and then at 7:25 we start seeing the parachutes unfurl, and so things will begin to slow down and be making its way down to its touchdown, which is scheduled for 7:40 a.m. Central Time.
Astray, 11 минут до разделения.
Astray, 11 minutes to separation.
As the Soyuz makes its way back toward Earth, the teams who will be meeting them at their landing site are also making their way to the deserts of Kazakhstan. We've got 8 M-18 helicopters on their way to the landing site, the primary landing site, which is southeast of Jeskazgan, along with in them, there's the television equipment that will provide the views of the landing and the inflatable medical tent that the crew members will be taken to immediately afterward. 2 other helicopters will be ready about 250 miles away in the area where touchdown would take place if a ballistic entry occurred, and a final 2 would loiter midway between the 2 sites. Also aboard the helicopter, heading to the primary site, there are several NASA representatives, including the Deputy Space Station Program Manager Dan Hartman, astronaut Kjell Lindgren, Flight Surgeon Rainer Effenhauser, and NASA Landing Team Coordinator Chad Rowe, as well as NASA spokesperson Gary Jordan and NASA photographer Bill Ingalls. Besides those helicopters, there are 6 all-terrain vehicles that have also been deployed for the landing and 3 airplanes that serve as flying command centers. The airplanes provide direct communications with the crew and relay those communications back to Moscow.
Australia, Super Москвы.
Australia, MCC Moscow.
Australia, ответьте.
Australia, MCC Moscow.
Australia, ответьте.
Australia, MCC Moscow.
Five minutes left now until the descent module will be disconnecting from the other 2 modules of the Soyuz, and again will be continuing on to Earth with Scott Tingle, Norishika Kanai, and Anton Shkaplerov inside.
Australia, this is MCC Moscow. How do you read us?
Australia, до разделения осталось меньше 4 минут.
Australia, less than 4 minutes remaining until separation. 40. Attitude is nominal. The crew members are feeling fine. Yes, we're reading you astray. How do you read us? I read you loud and clear. We also read you loud and clear. A reminder, after the separation, perform calm without leaving the push to talk button depressed.
Soyuz Commander Anton Shkaplerov there, confirming the crew is still doing well. Everything heading towards the descent module separation, coming up in just about 2 minutes now. Once again, after that, it'll just be a few minutes before the Soyuz begins experiencing the Earth's atmosphere. And at 7:25, about 33,000 feet above the Earth, the Soyuz computers will begin commanding the parachutes to deploy.
FCC Moscow, Astray 1. We have L9 illuminated. Copy. Altitude is 53 kilometers.
Двадцать
25 seconds to separation. Copy. FCC Moscow, Astray.
Team here on the ground reporting that the modules separated as planned. That was 7:14.
We're reading you with interferences. 10, 14, 262. Copy.
With that separation, Tingle, Kanai, and Shkaplerov are inside the descent module, which has separated from the orbital module and the instrumentation and propulsion module. The descent module will keep on path to its landing in Kazakhstan, while the orbital module and instrumentation and propulsion module will burn up in the Earth's atmosphere.
Astray, in 1 minute and a half, you will be performing reentry. Astray, 1 minute to reentry. 15:24. It's possible we won't be able to talk to you at that time.
71 штатная схема установлена. Нет, все хорошо.
Okay, everything is fine. Astray 1.
БСа нет. Это КПСа открыто. Заслонки
The covers are open. The flaps are open.
F1 АСП горит. Закрываем. Принято.
That one open. Copy.
Soyuz MS-07 with Scott Tingle, Norshiga Kanai, and Anton Shkaplerov inside has now begun to enter the period of atmospheric reentry. That's when the crew will begin to feel the first effects of gravity after their 168 days in space, and also when the Soyuz heat shield will have to come into play as it begins to interact with the Earth's atmosphere. For that reason, the descent module's computers orient the capsule so that the heat shield is pointing forward, protecting it from the heat generated. And over the next few minutes, that heat will build up and begin heating the air around the capsule so much that it forms a plasma.
Astray expecting reentry.
And during that time, we may hear less from the crew as the plasma builds up around the capsule and interferes with communication. That period should end around 7:23 when they come out of the atmospheric reentry portion and pass through the maximum gravity load that they'll experience on their way down. Just a minute or so left before the Soyuz makes it through the highest of the heating of their reentry into the Earth's atmosphere. And then in about 3 minutes, at 7:25, the Soyuz computers will command the first of its parachutes to deploy. All indications that everything is continuing to go well as the crew on board the Soyuz, Scott Tingle, Norishika Kanai, and Anton Shkaplerov, head towards their 7:40 a.m. Central Time touchdown in Kazakhstan.
Я-1, слышу вас хорошо. Понимаю ваше строение. Самочувствие экипажа хорошее. Отработали импульс без замечаний. Дельта Т атмосферная +3. 3 перелета, 3 секунды перелета. Как приняли? Это максимальная перегрузка. Максимальная перегрузка сейчас 4:03 падает.
15 integrals. 7, 9, 2 is the pressure in the descent module.
That was a good ride. Yeah. Like a small ship.
Where's the iPad? 15, 24, 23. Expecting. Copy all.
As you can tell, we've regained communication with the crew, and I believe I even heard Scott Tingle in there saying that it was a good ride through the plasma. Now we're coming up in just a minute or so on the point where the Soyuz computers will deploy the first of its parachutes. "14 minutes now until the scheduled touchdown, and the parachutes will have begun to deploy. It's about 33,000 feet above the Earth and traveling just under 500 miles per hour. Soyuz computers actually command the first of the parachutes deploy, and that's 2 pilot chutes, one that's 6.7 square feet and one that's 48.4 square feet. Those pull out the 172 square foot drogue chute. The drogue chute then slows the Soyuz down to about 178 miles per hour and begins stabilizing the capsule. And as you can see, we're getting a good view now of the Soyuz making its way home, still going fast under a drogue chute that will be making way for the 5,575 square foot main parachute. It slows down the Soyuz to about 22 miles per hour and holds it with a couple of harnesses at a 30-degree angle to the horizon until the bottom harness is removed and the Soyuz swings into a vertical position for touchdown.
The crew members are feeling well.
Inside the Soyuz capsule that you can see under that parachute, we have returning astronauts Scott Tingle, Norishika Kanai, and Anton Shkaplerov making their way home after 168 days in space.
Copy.
Everything continuing to go well as they head toward a 7:40 a.m. Central Time touchdown in Kazakhstan.
Yes. And the one on the right?
Welcome to those who are just joining us on Facebook Live. We're about 10 minutes away now from the landing of astronauts Scott Tingle, Norishika Kanai, and Anton Shkaplerov in their Soyuz MS-07 vehicle, which you can see here under its parachute, returning to Earth after 168 days in space. Everything's been going well on their return from the International Space Station, which began with a hatch closure at 12:55 a.m. Central Time this morning, followed by an undocking from the space station at 4:16 a.m. and then a deorbit burn at 6:47. It's making its way down for a touchdown at 7:40 a.m. Central Time in the Kazakhstan deserts southeast of Kazakhstan.
Copy all. We will verify it. Preparing for landing.
About 7 minutes away from landing in Kazakhstan for Scott Tingle, Norishika Kanai, and Anton Shkaplerov. They are in the Soyuz under that 5,575 square foot main parachute, making their way towards 7:40 a.m. Central Time landing. When they are about 39 feet above the Earth, the commander of the Soyuz, Anton Shkaplerov, will get a notice from the computers to prepare to fire 6 solid propellant engines called the soft landing engines that will slow the Soyuz down to about 5 feet per second or 3.5 miles per hour. Weather forecast looks to have lived up to its promise, which was clear skies, although the day is supposed to be breezy with winds up to 23 miles per hour and a fairly cool day as well with temperatures in the 60s. Less than 5 minutes to go before the capsule is scheduled to touch down at 7:40 a.m. It's going to be landing southeast of Kazakhstan, Kazakhstan. And contingent of Roscosmos and NASA personnel are on their way to meet it and be ready to get the 3 crew members inside the capsule out as quickly as possible after touchdown.
How do you read us?
should be a little bit over a minute away from the planned touchdown at 7:40 of this Soyuz MS-07, carrying Scott Tingle, Norishika Kanai, and Anton Shkaplerov back to Earth after 168 days in space. And as you saw there, the Soyuz MS-07 officially landed. Looked like that was at 7:39 a.m. Central Time, although we'll be sure and get an official time for you. That will be Central Time, or 6:39 p.m. Kazakhstan time. That brings to an end a 168-day in space for these three members of the Expedition 55 crew, NASA's Scott Tingle and the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency's Norishika Kanai, as well as Roscosmos's Anton Shkaplerov. This was the first flight for both Tingle and Kanai, so they now total 168 days spent in space, while Shkaplerov has now been to space 3 times and spent a total of 532 days there, tying him with Roscosmos's Mikhail Churin for 17th on the all-time list of days spent in space. With the crew now on the ground, you can already see that the support team is beginning to arrive and make their way to the landing site. That includes 8 Mi-8 helicopters, including the ones that provided us those great views coming down before touchdown, and also carrying an inflatable medical tent that the crew will use after they've gotten out of the capsule. There are also a number of NASA representatives on board the helicopters, including Deputy Space Station Program Manager Dan Hartman, astronaut Kjell Lindgren, Flight Surgeon Rainier Effenhauser, NASA Landing Team Coordinator Chad Rowe, and the NASA spokesperson Gary Jordan, as well as NASA photographer Bill Ingalls. Also deployed for landing were 6 all-terrain vehicles and 3 airplanes that served as flying command centers. They gave us direct communication with the crew and relayed that communication back to Moscow. As the helicopters arrive, that portable medical tent will be set up near the capsule where the crew will be able to change out of their launch and entry suits. The Russian technicians will open the Soyuz hatch and help the crew members out, but since they've been living in zero gravity for the past 168 days, they'll be feeling the effects of being back on the Earth's surface, and so we'll be seated in some special reclining chairs near the capsule for some quick medical tests and phone calls. Then as soon as possible after landing, the crew will be helped into helicopters for flight back to Karaganda, Kazakhstan, where local officials will welcome them at the airport. Then Tingle and Kanai will return to Houston while Shkaplerov goes back to Moscow. Touchdown today came at 7:39 a.m. Central Time, or 6:39 p.m. Kazakhstan time. And as you see, already the helicopters beginning to land, and people begin making their way to the capsules so that they can get the crew members on board out and back onto firm ground for the first time in 168 days. Once again, the crew inside the Soyuz MS-07 vehicle. Touchdown at 7:39 a.m. Central Time, just even a almost right on time, a little ahead of schedule even, following great smooth transition from deorbit all the way down to landing with everything going well. And now the crews at the scene will begin to arrive at the landing site and get ready to help the crew members out of their capsule. While we wait to get video back from the landing site, we have a few more social media questions we'll take from folks who submitted them using the hashtag AskNASA. Nani on Twitter asks, is there a rest period before the crew members are allowed to return home once they've landed? And not really. They will be taken out of the Soyuz capsule and moved into the reclining seats that I mentioned a moment ago so that they don't have to stand while they're going through kind of the initial moments of their return to Earth. And then they'll be moved to a medical tent where they'll actually get out of their launch and entry suits and into something more comfortable. And they'll get straight into the helicopters and head back to the airport at Karaganda before they get on planes to return to their respective homes. For Scott Tingle and Norishika Kanai, that will be a long flight back to Houston, and for Anton Shkaplerov, that will be a flight back to Moscow. Once they do return home, they'll have more medical tests, and then they will get a little bit of downtime before they return to even more medical tests and start doing some technical debriefings. From Wrinklepore on Twitter, we have the question, who will greet the Soyuz crew at the landing spot? And I've mentioned those names a few times. There's a pretty good crew that will be there with representatives from Roscosmos and NASA. A few of the folks there for NASA include the Deputy Space Station Program Manager, Dan Hartman. Astronaut Kjell Lindgren, who's been to the space station and done a few of these landings, will be there on hand to help the astronauts with anything they might need as they're getting ready to board the helicopters and then make the trip home. Also, Flight Surgeon Rainer Effenhauser will be there on hand to help with their medical needs, and NASA Landing Team Coordinator Chad Rowe is overseeing the operations. Also, we'll hopefully hear a little bit later from NASA spokesperson Gary Jordan, who is on the scene and traveled out on the helicopters, and of course, NASA photographer Bill Ingalls is there getting photos. And here are those reclining chairs already set up, waiting for the crew. You can see this live view from the landing site at Kazakhstan, where, as you can see, there's quite a few people there gathered to help with the operations. The first crew member taken out is usually the center seat, the commander, in this case, Anton Shkaplerov. Lost that live view for the moment, but are hoping to get it back momentarily. Again, didn't look like any of the crew members had been taken out just yet, but I'm sure that is going to be happening momentarily. Back now with that live video from the landing site where the crew touched down at 7:39 a.m. Central Time. Commander of the Soyuz capsule, Anton Shkaplerov, there, the first one out, as he was in the center seat, and teams behind him will be working on getting Scott Tingle and Norishika Kanai out as well.
С той стороны двое, и все. Остальные, кто работает с нашим капитаном, пускай работает.
From the left side. Yes. Good afternoon.
It's the answer to one of the questions that we have received on Twitter from Sean Economist, asking what the first food they will eat when they come back is. That's generally left up to the crew member's preference, and it looks like for Shkaplerov that might have been a bowl of grapes. Fresh fruit and vegetables are always in high demand after the crews get back from the space station, where they don't have access to fresh food and have to generally eat mostly dehydrated or prepackaged food. Mentioned earlier that my colleague, NASA spokesperson Gary Jordan, is at the landing site, and he's going to be joining us now via satellite phones. Gary, can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear, Brandy. It is a wonderful day here. As you can see from the video feed, there are no clouds in the sky. The sun is shining, and we got our crew members safe here on the ground. Capsule landed perfectly upright. Now we're actually waiting for Scott Tingle to come out. Anton Shkaplerov, you can see, is already seated and taken out of the capsule safely. The experts are now above the capsule. You see they set up the platform that allows some of the experts in getting the crew out of the capsule out. Right next to them is a slide. That slide allows them to easily carry them down and over to the chair where they'll be seated and greeted by the many people you can see here surrounding the landing site today. Also inside Norishika Kanai, all three crew here on the ground today. Everything's looking good on our end here, Brandy.
Thanks so much for the report, Gary. Looks like we're about to see somebody else come out.
Yeah, looks like we're you can see Scott Tingle coming out now, doing a couple fist bump smiles on his face. Very happy to see his fellow crewmates and his colleagues here welcoming him almost immediately. I actually was able to see the landing itself. It was perfectly clear, sun was shining, and as soon as it landed, I saw a small explosion at the bottom of the capsule to soften and dampen the landing. And again, that capsule landed upright, nice and perfectly. So Scott is, you can see, happy to get out and breathe his first fresh air here on Earth in 168 days since he's been on orbit. Now you can see he's going down the slide, still smiling, getting ready for to be seated over here next to his fellow crewmate Anton Shkaplerov. Last person will be Norishika Kanai.
Hold on.
But Brandy, everything is looking fantastic here. The weather is balmy, very, very temperate. Sun is shining, and we're happy to have our crewmates home.
Like this.
That's great, and you can tell that the crew is very happy to be home, and it sounds like the crowd is happy to see them as well.
Welcome home. Absolutely, Brandy. And you can see the crew, Scott Tingle is now being seated right next to Anton Shkaplerov, the commander of the Soyuz, shaking some hands of the experts who have just taken him over to his seat for the very first time.
And I know this is the first time
right next to him, shaking hands, and as well as the interpreter. It won't be long after all three of the crewmates are seated here. We'll have some media here take some photos, and right behind the media is an orange tent. They'll do some field tests here on the ground. This is part of the Human Research Program study that allows us to understand sort of what happens to the crew members after they come home safe and sound from Earth. This is only 168 days, but we're looking forward to trips further out into the solar system, to Mars and beyond.
Well, it looks like this has been a very smooth afternoon for you guys on the support crew and the guys inside the capsule as well. I know this was your first trip out. Is it living up to your expectations?
Beyond my expectations, Brandy. I will say this was truly an international effort. It was days of planning and lots of folks coming from all over Kazakhstan, Russia, all coming to support this landing today. Truly an international effort, and everything came together perfectly. You know, we sat down and planned for today, giving the time that we were going to land, and lo and behold, here we were within eye shot of the capsule itself, minutes later down on the ground ready to extract the crew. Truly an international effort and a great representation of international cooperation here. Honestly, very much exceeds my expectations. Very happy to be here.
That's great, Gary. Thanks so much for taking the time to call in, and we will let you go while we stand by for the first view of Kanai coming out of the capsule.
Thank you, Brandy. Very happy to call in, and back to you over in Mission Control.
Thanks. Y'all have a smooth trip home.
Thank you.
That again was a NASA spokesperson, Gary Jordan, reporting from live on the scene of the landing site. The capsule again touched down at 7:39 a.m. Central Time, and already Anton Shkaplerov and Scott Tingle are out and enjoying some fresh air for the first time in 168 days. The team here on top of the capsule still working to get the final crew member out. That's Norishige Kanai, who is with the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency.
Okay, let's move on. Are you ready there on the ground? Yes. Are you ready?
Japanese astronaut Norishige Kanai now making his way down to the ground with the help of some of the support folks here. That's all three of the crew members out of the Soyuz. They again spent 168 days in space, 166 at the International Space Station. And they traveled over the course of that stay 71.2 million miles over 2,688 orbits of the Earth. They've come a long way since their launch on December 17th.
Let's start the measurements.
From Baikonur, Kazakhstan, and now touchdown back in Kazakhstan, going through a few tests before they make their way back home to Houston and Moscow.
Go ahead on 2.
And they had a successful ride, and I want to thank everybody at Mission Control for providing the information, the uplinks, and the updates to the departure deorbit burns and arrivals. So thanks for that assistance and the support, and we look forward to continuing the excellent work here on ISS.
Completely agree. It was a really beautiful landing. The weather looks fantastic, and the crew's happy. And, well, we thank you for all your hard work on Expedition 55 so far, and look forward to continuing with 56.
To support, and so far so good. We look forward to another 4 months on orbit, and soon we'll be taking that same ride back to the planet.
Yeah, enjoy your rest day.
A few words there from the Expedition 56 crew members left behind on the International Space Station, talking with the Capcom here in Mission Control Center, Andreas Mogensen, who is an ESA astronaut. All the crew members again are now out of their Soyuz and looking good, going through a few medical tests, making some calls to friends and family not at the landing site before they will be whisked away to the medical tent that was brought out to the landing site for their use. They'll be getting out of their launch and entry suits and then making their way to the helicopters that will take them back first to Karaganda, where they'll board airplanes to Houston for Tingle and Kanai, and to Moscow for Shkaplerov.
I don't know. We're going to move closer here. Sergey, we're going to move closer here. Could you tell us how the landing was proceeding, how you're feeling? Well, first of all, feeling well. We're feeling a bit tired. At the same time, we're proud to have accomplished it, and we are glad to be back on Earth. We're glad that the weather is beautiful, it's sunny. So the landing was quote-unquote soft. Considering there's a slight wind on the ground, you know. We wanted to say thank you to all the services who were supporting our nominal landing. Noticed an off-nominal case right away, and they set up comm with us.
Crew members also answering a few questions from media. Looks like they're all still doing good, feeling well, and should be moving into the medical tent before too long to get out of those launch and entry suits that they wore from the International Space Station, change into flight suits they can wear for the long ride home.
Are you ready? Ready. Watch your step.
Crew is being carried away to the medical tent. There was Norshika Kanai, and now here is Anton Shkaplerov. Astronauts are carried to give them a little bit of extra support since they have just taken a fairly wild ride from the International Space Station down to Earth and haven't been in gravity for the past 168 days. This gives them a little bit of a chance to adjust before they're expected to walk on their own steam.
That's number 2. The second one.
Okay, so Scott will go into the first compartment. As soon as you enter the door, the first one to the left. Okay.
And there's Scott Tingle making his way to the medical tent. Once again, once they're there, they will be able to get out of those launch and entry suits, and they'll have a few tests that they take part in before they are able to board their helicopters and make their way home.
Hold on. That's all.
Нет, я вот честно что-то как бы сейчас запутаюсь. Нет. Нет, как он там располагает.
Его нет, уже нет.
Кто-нибудь? Да.
crew members are safely into the medical tent now, and we're not currently receiving video, but we're going to stick around and see if there are any views of the landing that we can replay for you. We'll hold on for that and see what else we might be able to bring you. And as promised, here is some additional views of today's landing. This is recorded from earlier that we're able to replay for you now. This landing, of course, has already taken place, and the crew touched down at 7:39 a.m. Central Time. We'll have, I think, a couple of views for you in addition to what we got real time. And the crew that returned in that capsule is already out of the capsule and in the medical tent getting ready for their return home. More recorded video from today's earlier landing of the Soyuz MS-07, which again took place at 7:39. While we wait to see if we get any more views, let's take a few more questions from social media. Again, people sending them in using the hashtag AskNASA. This one from Stare, asking when will they see their family. The families don't normally come out to Kazakhstan for the landing, although they do often travel out for the launch activities. Once they get back on the airplane that they'll be boarding in Karaganda, Kazakhstan, they'll be going back to either Houston or Moscow, and generally their families are able to meet them at the airport there. From Marwan on Twitter, we have this question. Are the astronauts tested for any alien diseases or microbes upon returning from the space station? No, we don't really worry too much about alien diseases, but they do go through a lot of medical tests. In fact, they'll probably be going through one about right now called the field test, which we generally put them through some what seem like very simple tasks, things like stepping up onto a box or pretending like you have fallen on the ground and then getting back up. Things that seem very easy to us, but are a little bit more difficult if you've been living in zero gravity for the past 168 days. Karen asked on Twitter, how fast is the capsule going when it hits the ground? It looks like it's a pretty hard jolt. It's supposed to, with the help of the parachutes and the soft landing engines, it's supposed to be going about 3.5 miles per hour, which does not sound very fast, but all the astronauts will usually tell you that it's faster than it seems, and it's a little bit like a car crash. They all come out of it okay, and are certainly happy to have taken the ride, but it is a bit of a rough landing. And this one from Sean, the economist, that we were able to answer earlier. What is the first food they'll eat when they come back? You saw Anton Shkaplerov eating some grapes, and then other crew members are generally able to kind of put it in order within reason for what they would like to have kind of waiting for them when they return to the ground. Continuing to see some replays from the activities that went on earlier today. All the crew now are out, but we're seeing here a replay of the process of getting them out, with the ladder and slide being fitted over the top of the capsule that allows the crew on the ground to then make their way up to the top of the capsule and help the crew members inside out. Also saw one of the astronauts waving through the window there for a moment. Been seeing replays of some of the work that went on the ground after the Soyuz landed in Kazakhstan at 7:39 a.m. Central Time. We're still standing by to see if there are any more replays before we wrap up today's coverage. Okay, we think that there are no more replays that we'll be able to show you today. So with the crew safely back in Kazakhstan and preparing for their respective flights home, we'll wrap up tonight's coverage of the Expedition 55 landing. Again, that touchdown time came at 7:39 a.m. Central or 6:39 p.m. in Kazakhstan. The 3 Expedition 55 crew members will be replaced by 3 more Expedition 56 crew members in just a few days. NASA's Serena Anand-Chancellor, ESA's Alexander Gerst, and Roscosmos's Sergei Prokopyev are currently in Baikonur, Kazakhstan, preparing for launch, so be sure and tune back in at 5:15 a.m. Central on June 6 to see their takeoff. Again, that'll be at 5:15 a.m. Central Time on June 6th. So for now, we are going to sign off from here in Mission Control Houston.